Hello, everybody, and welcome back to CGDQ Redone. 10 years ago, we had Essentia playing Donkey Kong Country 2, and 10 years later, we have Essentia playing Donkey Kong Country 2 for us. Hi, Essentia.
Hey.
To finish off our Donkey Kong block, we got Donkey Kong Country 2 with Essentia and Puwexil here in commentary. Hello.
Hello, hello, hello.
Go ahead and take it away. What can you tell us about this game? Hello.
Second Donkey Kong Country game. It's a pretty different kind of a run from the first one because of a lot of new mechanics added to the game, like how Donkey and Diddy and Dixie control pretty differently from Donkey in the first game. So they're both actually used in the run, and then there's also team throws and just lots of other little platforming mechanics we'll get into as the run starts.
Right,
Yeah,
well,
so I guess we're ready to start then?
we are, yeah.
All right, I'll count it down. 3, 2, 1, go.
Good luck.
Good luck.
All right, so one pretty big difference from the first Donkey Kong Country game too is that in the first game there were a lot of developer-intended warp barrels just kind of scattered all throughout the game here and there. But in Donkey Kong Country 2, they're only in the first two worlds, but they're in every stage of the first two worlds. So for about the first 5 minutes or so of the run, Essentia is not really going to be playing a whole lot of each stage. She's just going to be doing what she needs to get to the warp zone barrel and then just breeze through. Some of these, good luck actually finding them playing the game blind too, like the one in Main Brace Mayhem.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know about any of these until I started speedrunning the game.
Yeah, I'm not sure I did either, to be honest. Yeah, and there's our first team throw right there, where she threw Diddy up into the off-screen warp zone barrel. Again, that's a new mechanic for Donkey Kong Country 2 that's going to be used very, very, very extensively all throughout. And I guess while she's going through the last normal stage in World 1, Donkey Kong Country 2 doesn't really a whole lot of randomness or RNG, as we like to call it shorthand, but the only real source of randomness in this game is the bosses, and the first boss is the worst of them all, Crow.
Oh, yeah.
Because it takes 4 hits with eggs in order to beat Crow and end World 1, but the first 2 eggs are guaranteed, but after that it becomes random, whether they're real or fake, and then there's no known way to manipulate that.
Yeah, so anyone want to guess how many fake eggs we're gonna have?
My quote-unquote PB is 13.
In practice, I was getting about 1 or 2. Well,
I don't actually know offhand what the odds are. I want to say it's about 50-50.
well, I'm not getting such good luck this time. There, so that was like 5, I think.
Sounds about right. And then also, she does want to end each boss fight as Dixie, if possible, too, just because I guess something else we didn't really explain is that at the end of each stage, there's a goalpost, and normally if you jump onto it from kind of high, above a certain height, you'll get some kind of prize, like a 1-up or bananas. But that also means you do an extended fanfare to end the stage, either a kind of a DK rap with Diddy or a guitar solo with Dixie, and she's trying to avoid those as much as possible because it's slower. But after you beat bosses, that fanfare is unavoidable, and Dixie's guitar solo is a little bit shorter than Diddy's rap, so that's why she always wants to end boss fights as Dixie.
And on a lot of these goals, I'm doing goal switches. So what I do is land right next to the goal, to the side of it, and then push select to switch character, and it automatically switches the characters and activates the goal at the same time.
Yeah, saves a little bit of time each time because then she doesn't have to actually jump. She just presses select and that instantly ends this. And then this stage right here, getting the extended fanfare is unavoidable because of just how the fact that you come out of the warp zone into another barrel pointed at the. I believe that's the only one though.
Yeah, that one is.
I remember this one taking me a while to learn, even as simple as the stage is too, because of the positioning of the warp zone. Because you have to, at least if you're doing it safely, you have to push the balloon off the steam plume just a little bit before doing the team throw in order to hit the warp zone.
Oh, and whoops.
Well, that is where the warp zone barrel is, but it's pretty far over the pit. Another one of those ones where like how are you supposed to find that blind?
Yeah, that death there was kind of that's never happened before.
Gotta have at least one per marathon run.
Get it out of the way right now.
Alright, so now we have Cleaver. I think Cleaver is one of the harder bosses in the run. Just because there's so many really easy ways to die from falling into the lava. There's a little bit of randomness as far as where the cannonballs spawn. For the most part, it doesn't really matter as far as how fast the fight goes, but it's something you need to kind of deal with as far as just how you go for the cannonball. Yeah, Cleaver is very, very easy to manipulate, though. So she's following a kind of a somewhat scripted movement pattern in order to line up Cleaver getting close right when the cannonball spawns, so that she can grab it and get the hit as fast as possible.
Well, that went well.
Yep, and now that we're done with World 2, the run really begins, because there's no more developer-intended warp zones, so now she actually has to play out all of the stages in full. A true any percent run of this game would be using what are called wrong warps here and there to do kind of to do glitches where you can end the stages early, but she's not going to be doing this for this run tonight, so mostly a warpless run, but still doing the warp zone barrels in the first worlds. So this is our first use of Rambi the Rhino we saw in DKC 1 as well, and he's pretty similar in this game because of this level being very long and very horizontal. She's making use of Rambi's charge in order to move faster. And it may look kind of silly to throw Diddy into the barrel like that, but that's actually setting up for a minor glitch near the end of the stage. I like to call the swamp glide, where she jumps into the enemy there and take intentional damage, and very nice. Yeah, throwing Diddy into that barrel was required in order to actually kind of make the damage boost send her up high enough in order to be able to glide all the way across. That saves like 8 seconds or so, I think.
So we might want an epilepsy warning on this level.
Yeah. Yeah, this is Glimmer's Galleon, which is the only kind of pure swimming stage that you have to do exclusively as the Kongs. And then this is also kind of a you can tell instantly based on this stage whether somebody's playing this game on the original Super Nintendo or on the Wii Virtual Console, because on the Wii they actually took out the blinding frame whenever Glimmer turns around, and I would say for good reason. Is it people sensitive to bright flashing lights I want to look away for a bit. But this level, I say isn't really all that difficult just to survive through, but it's very, very, very difficult to optimize because of the water physics. If you bonk into corners, that costs about at least a second or two alone, as far as you having to regain your full swim speed. There's a lot of tight squeezes through enemies too.
Yeah, I haven't been getting those tight squeezes.
Yeah, but fortunately, the placement of the DK barrels works out pretty nicely. That you're never really in a lot of danger of taking a death, because if you get hit by one of the fish, you'll usually get a DK barrel right afterwards. Crockhead Clamor is another long horizontal stage. A theme you'll notice throughout the run too is that for horizontal movement, Essentia is going to try to play as Diddy as much as possible, just because his straight up movement speed is a bit faster than Dixie's. But Dixie can glide, which helps a lot in a platforming game like this too. Which is I think one of the things that just makes this a really cool speed run in general is that both of the characters you can play as are both very useful in different ways, and how you make use of those all throughout the stages is pretty interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of really tight jumps you can make in this stage to try to cut out either landing on reeds or crockheads or bouncing on enemies, but a lot of cases if you go for one of those risky jumps, you die if you miss it.
Now my favorite level.
Rattle battle. Yes. Yeah, this is I think the first stage in the run where you have to play as one of the animals. It's not an option. And Ratley the snake has pretty interesting physics and controls, because for starters, Ratley is always jumping. Even if you just move left and right, he still does these kind of little short hops. And
It's
also
really
just
easy to get off. Yeah.
yeah, because there's no RNG in this stage, so it's all you can follow a script, but there's just so much pickiness as far as actually like hitting the enemies versus getting hit, because of how Ratley's hitbox I think only covers like the bottom half of his body, I want to say, and also just manage it, and also you get to control how much height you gain off a jump after you bounce off an enemy too, so that there's a lot of micromanagement of that. Yeah, she just did a cool little tech there called a short hop jump too, where she used the natural short bouncing that Ratley does to go off of one of the barrels to kind of float in midair before doing a real jump in order to better line up jumping onto the next enemy.
Yeah, so I played that level a little bit safer than usual.
Are you going to fly at all, or just go
Yes,
straight in?
we are gonna fly.
Excellent. So there's a very fun glitch in this stage where if you do a Kong swap when one Kong is underwater and the other is not, and then take damage, you'll kind of glitch out the game's physics so that it kind of thinks you're still underwater, and that lets you just zip straight up, and that breaks the rising water mechanics in this stage normally, because normally the water is kind of chasing you along with an invincible lockjaw fish. But that's now broken, so she's just straight up climbing up the rest of the ropes. This is also the first major wrong warp, if this were a straight up any percent run too. But even without doing the wrong warp, doing the flying monkeys glitch, in addition to looking really cool, also saves some time.
Oh, and I activated the goal. Now you get to see how much time this wastes.
Yeah, and yeah, I get the slower version too because of being.
I was trying to do a goal switch there because I want to start this level with Dixie.
Yeah, so this stage should kind of be obvious now, is themed exclusively around barrel cannon mazes, and whenever your Kongs enter one of the barrel cannons where it rotates and you press the B button in order to shoot out, you can if you press the B button again within 3 frames, which is 3/60ths of a second after going in, you can actually shoot out before the barrel rotates. And there's several places where doing that saves a bunch of time. she's going into the brambles intentionally in order to get invincibility frames to go through that bee and skip about half of that circle of barrels. Very nice so far, and then we're coming up on the maze skip. We like to call this the maze of shame if you actually have to go through the final barrel maze in this stage, but there's several ways to avoid it. The hard way is to clip through the vines beforehand, and the easier but no less satisfying way is just to do a team throw around one of the barrels. And then we have Cudgel, who's not really that exciting of a boss. You basically just have to keep waiting through these jump cycles until Cudgel spawns TNT barrels that you throw at him. There's a more advanced strat for this fight too, where you kind of count Dixie's breaths while she's holding the TNT barrel, and then you can basically move out of the way right as Cudgel is landing on you. But it's fairly difficult and only saves about 2 seconds too. And you can kind of see how long each of these cycles between the hits takes. You really do not want to lose a cycle if you don't feel totally comfortable with the more advanced strategy. It's a little more interesting in the second half of the fight because then Cudgel doesn't go all the way off screen. It's a little easy to kind of fall asleep during this fight too, to be honest, but that's also a recipe for messing up.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything during that fight because I didn't want to jinx myself, but yeah, I'd say that's the easiest boss of the game.
Alright, so that is it for World 3. First kind of quote-unquote real world in this category. Move on to World 4 now. So I said a bit ago that normally in a stage that has a lot of horizontal movement, you normally play as Diddy, but for Hornet Hole, the first stage of World 4, the more consistent route uses Dixie actually for most of the stage, just because you can glide over the honey, which you normally get stuck on. Like there's a more advanced route that uses Diddy, but I mean, it's a lot riskier because of having to deal with the bees in the first half. So a little cameo by Squidder the spider. She's using to set up another really cool glitch.
Except it didn't work.
Oh yeah, your web was a little too high.
Yeah, it was. You know what? I'm just gonna die and start over because I want to show this glitch.
Yeah, it's really cool, and not really that hard too.
No, I just didn't have it set up right.
Yeah. So what she's trying to do there is actually set it up so that she creates a web right below that hook and then jumps off the spider so that she's getting onto the hook and onto the spider at the same time. And then that's going to be setting up I really couldn't tell you kind of how or why this works, but it's going to be breaking the way that the camera scrolls in a pretty flashy way. Alright, and then as soon as she rolls through that first enemy, you zoom. And you keep zooming until you take damage. So before you get to the end, you do have to take damage on one of the bees in order to release the lock on the camera.
And unfortunately, I lost Dixie. I like to use her at this part.
Yeah, because there's more honey where it's a lot easier to just be able to glide over it.
Yeah, I would have been able to skip a lot of that there with Dixie.
I find just playing the parts of these stages with a different Kong than you're used to be one of the more challenging parts of this run too. I know it's a really big deal in Donkey 1 as well because of how different Donkey and Diddy are. Alright, so now we have Target Terror, which is our first true auto-scroller. And in this one, because when you jump, you're jumping off of your cart, that unfortunately means that there's very, very little that Essentia can do to actually save time in this level. The biggest thing is to try to minimize the number of enemies that she kills, because every time she kills an enemy, there's a few frames of lag when the game's kind of drawing the stars and making the sound effect for the enemy death.
Yeah, there's not really a whole lot to say about this level.
Yeah. Other than that, you can risk death at 2 points to save 20 frame.
Well, I'm planning to skip one dragonfly near the end.
Okay. Oh, right. That's the one where you just hit the target if you miss it instead of dying. Oh, I'm seeing some chat questions about swag balloon. Are we gonna swag?
Balloon, huh? All right.
We got the swag. Nice. Yeah, if she didn't jump at just the right angle to get the balloon without touching that target, then she would have lost a Kong on the gate. Alright, so now we've got Bramble Scramble, which, if you're not doing the wrong warp, involves playing as Squawks the Parrot for most of the stage, and doing this warpless, I think, is actually harder than doing the wrong warp, at least kind of trying to go as fast as possible, because you've got all these bees and then cycle-based Kremlings with cannonballs and hooks.
So unfortunately, I lost Diddy, and Dixie is a lot slower at climbing.
Yeah.
So I've actually got to switch to him.
Yeah, and you can't swap when you're climbing on something. So yeah, if she wants to use Diddy for this rope section here, she had to drop back down. But this next part right here with the cannonballs, I think, is really, really hard to do as Dixie because of the fact that she moves slower. We've got the last parrot section here. Little fun bit of trivia is that there's actually more bees in this last big room with bees in it in the English version of the game for whatever reason compared to the Japanese version. Alright, very nice.
So this next level is my 3-year-old son's favorite level.
Ooh.
He always asks me to do the race.
Well, at least somebody really likes this level, because I'm not really a big fan, to be honest. But yeah, this is another auto-scroller. This one is I think it's kind of deceptively dangerous too, because it doesn't have a checkpoint, and the easiest place to die is actually pretty close to the end. But unlike in Target Terror, whenever she jumps in this stage, her card is coming with her. So there's actually little bits of tech here and there that she can do to make her cart go faster, like jumping up and down certain slopes in the track. Lets her jumping over certain down slopes lets her avoid losing a bit of momentum. Yeah, and then no problems with the number 2 racer, who's the hardest part of this level, because he comes right before a pit, so it's pretty easy to bonk on him and then go sailing off into the pit.
Yeah, the number 2 one, he's the worst.
Alright, done with auto-scrollers for a while. Now it's time for a pretty hard stage called Mudhole Marsh. This stage just has so many pits that are very easy to fall into. And the fastest strats for the first half of the stage involve doing some pretty tight jumps over the birds. And then there's a hidden invincibility barrel where that banana is that makes this next bird section a lot easier.
Well, it's supposed to.
Oh, I've still died even with the invincibility several times because I mean it's kind of I find it pretty easy to just get thrown off by landing on an enemy that you were intending to roll through, which makes you bounce instead of keep rolling. So that just kind of just throws off the movement that you're used to.
Yeah, and then I got hurt near the beginning, and I'm not used to using Dixie for the beginning of this. This is one of my least favorite levels. So I'm kind of not surprised I'm struggling on it. Okay, I'm just gonna take it a little safe here.
Yeah, the green cats that look like Sonic the Hedgehog are fairly dangerous too, because once they start actually spinning, you can't either roll through them or jump on them without taking damage, or worse, getting grabbed and thrown into a pit. Alright, past one of the harder parts of the stage. Okay, nice. Got the bird boosts off that pit there.
And I'm just taking all this a little bit safe.
Yeah, because the kind of the last third or so of the stage, if you're not doing the wrong warp, is kind of about knowing the timing of the barrel cannon shooters. Like I like to listen for the second shot before roll jumping to get across that last big pit. Alright, then we have Ramby Rumble, which is the last really long honey stage. It's definitely worth pointing out that climbing vertical honey fast is a lot harder than it looks. Ah, nice, got the big boy jump. There's a minor glitch where if you basically kill an enemy with a team throw and then press B at a certain point when your Kong is returning to you, you can do an extra large jump, and she just did it there in order to skip a pretty big chunk of the Kong section of Ramby Rumble. And then the second half, she has to play Ramby. Yeah, taking it safe on that first level, I don't blame you. It is so easy to die.
I know. There's so many times where I just land in the pit.
Yeah.
Oops. And I totally messed this up.
So ooh.
Yeah, I wondered if that would happen. Okay, that's never happened before either.
Yeah, the ending to Ramby Rumble is it's a chase basically against the boss of World 4, King Zing Sting, and if you do it just right, you actually never actually see the large bee. You just hear the kind of really sinister sounding music when it starts chasing you. But if you time your dashes with Ramby just right, you'll just blow him away in the race.
Okay, now I'm going to show you how it's supposed to go.
Very nice. And yeah, Ramby actually has a really generous hitbox as far as being able to go through or on top of enemies. So just you don't really the kind of timing and positioning to bounce over all those waves of bees isn't actually that picky, which is very nice. All right, and then we've got King's Sting. It's kind of a two-phase fight. First phase, she needs to hit the bee's stinger whenever it's yellow. Timing for the shots is a little particular, but there's no real RNG here too, so it's something that
It's just such a small hitbox.
yeah. You kind of want to manipulate the bee's movements too, so that you're ready to shoot again as soon as its invincibility wears off. And the second phase is after killing the bee ring. It's basically just about trying to avoid getting greedy, as far as thinking that you have enough time to get a hit in without having to move around the bee, and then finding out you don't, and then it rams into you. Alright, on to World 5. One of the definitely one of the more challenging worlds in this run. This world actually doesn't have any wrong warps in it, at least that can be done in real time. So this is all the same as would be done in a straight any % run. The theme for 5.1 is ghost ropes, which they spawn based on your position, but they also have a time limit too before they disappear. I find this a pretty fun level in the run too, because of it's all about rolling and jumping.
Yeah, this is one of the more fun levels, I think, to speedrun.
Dude, didn't need to despawn that last cloak guy too. Alright, Haunted Hall is our third and final cart-based auto-scroller. Like with Rickety Race, your cart comes with you when you jump. So there's little bits of there's frames that can be saved here and there based on when and where she jumps. A pretty easy one is actually just jumping into the gates that are the kind of the pseudo checkpoints throughout the stage too, because just jumping into the gate saves a few frames. And if it wasn't obvious, the gimmick here is that ghost Kremling chasing you will make you take damage if the timer at the top runs out, and you can extend the timer by hitting the green barrels, and if you hit a red barrel, you lose time. For each section, I think it generally works out that you can either miss one green barrel or hit one red barrel without problems.
Yeah, there is a little bit of leeway.
And you don't die if it happens to, you just take damage. I got past the English bees, as I call them. It's those two bees there, where for just whatever reason there's two of them in the English version instead of one in the Japanese version. Alright, and then Gusty Glade, as the name implies, the theme here is wind. The wind is position-based. When you hit certain horizontal positions in the stage, that triggers the wind to change directions. And it works both with and against you. This pillars section, I think, can be dangerous too.
Yeah, I've died there more times than I should.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to skip pillars too, which saves time, but if you miss one, you die. And then at some point near the end of the stage, with this route, you do want to switch to Dixie. in order to be able to glide over, to use the wind to glide over the last pit section. Very nice. Now it is time for everybody's favorite stage, Parachute Panic. This is basically intended to be kind of an auto scroller where you ride blue parrots down a vertical shaft, but you can actually you can either avoid the parrots or press X to dismount them, and doing that lets you kind of turn this from a vertical auto scroller to a really challenging kind of fast-paced falling stage. It's going pretty well so far. You have a lot of options for how to play this level too, as far as like how many damage boosts you take to get invincibility frames versus just kind of trying to purely avoid the enemies. Nice, didn't get trolled by the Diddy headbutt.
Oh, wow.
Nice. That was a
went
really
really
good
well.
parachute. Yeah, for whatever reason, at the very end when she hit that bee, Diddy can clip around the corner, and that messes everything up because then you won't be invincible long enough to clip through bees. But nice. But now we get to celebrate beating a very difficult stage by doing one that I think is even harder, Web Woods.
Yeah, I would say it is. I would say this is harder than Parachute Panic.
Yeah. So for the bulk of this stage, you do have to play as Squidder the spider, and
Oh.
the platforming is all based around using Squidder's web platforms that you can either press A or L or R. And the speed tech she's using is called instant platforms, where she hits L and R at the same time in order to just instantly create a platform. This is another stage where you have a lot of options. Ah, nice. Yeah, I went for a damage boost there, where you jump into one of the bees, and then basically as the star from the damage sprite disappears, you can make another jump in midair, and you can kind of see just how slow just creating these platforms to move horizontally can be. So doing damage boosts to just be able to jump over pits in midair saves a fair bit of time.
Okay, I'm gonna
Nice.
take this end part really carefully.
Yeah, I can't blame you. My PB has a death in this stage, and I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Okay.
All right, it's finally time to breathe after Parachute and Web Woods back. All right, so if one heavily random fight with Crow wasn't enough for you, we got a second one here with Creepy Crow. This one isn't quite as bad as the first fight because the randomness here is just which side of the screen the barrels spawn on, but especially for the second layer, getting the worst possible one is a fair bit slower than the best. Ooh.
This is not going well for me.
So for the second hit, we really want to see the barrel spawn on the right, because then you just grab it and jump into Crow and you're done. Yeah, the middle isn't too bad, but the left is what you don't want to see, because then you have to go all the way across and back.
Oh. Yeah, I'm not used to doing that part with Dixie.
Yeah.
Slower climber than Diddy.
Climbing ropes fast in this game is actually pretty hard too, because the ropes like to eat your jump inputs, because it's a lot faster to jump up ropes than to actually climb, and because Dixie climbs slower than Diddy, that throws off the timing in its own way too. So hopefully get better RNG on the second layer this time. Come on, right side.
Nope.
Ah, boo. Crow, please. Alright, done with Crow for good. Alright, on to World 6, kind of the last full-length world in the run, because World 7 is only one stage and the final boss. Arctic Abyss, the first stage of World 6, is a mostly underwater level, and you're required to play as On Guard, the fish, for most of it. Yeah, she did a really kind of subtle turnaround there to try to despawn a puffer fish coming up here. I got the despawn at least. I do feel like the developers threw in a lot of DK barrels into this stage to apologize for just how easy it is to get hit as On Guard, because there's a point after you do the On Guard's lunge attack where you're just a sitting duck, and it's really easy to take damage. Especially if you kind of lunge too short and don't quite hit an enemy you were intending to kill. And for the last section here too, there's a sweet spot where if you do your charge dash at that point, the falling water physics will carry you with it. Alright, Windy Well. I like this stage because I like the music, and this is the only stage in the game where you get to hear the mining theme without using a warp zone barrel. So this is a little bit like Gusty Glade, only it's vertical instead of horizontal. Ah, nice, got the B skip there. There's a lot of really kind of tight bits of movement that you can go for to just skip around bees and platforms here and there.
Yeah, and you can also speed up and slow down.
Yeah, by pressing up and down on your D-pad.
Yeah. So most of the time,
that was a really nicely easy B skip there, where you just hold left basically after the wind gets you. Because having to go under bees with wind, I think, is the hardest part of the stage.
I didn't get this skip here.
Yeah, she was trying to kind of hit that bee when the camera was, I believe, all the way to the left in order to boost through the floor. But fortunately, she gets to try it again.
There.
All right, very nice.
Somehow I missed that platform.
Wow.
I don't like doing this part with Dixie.
Yeah, this last part here is really stressful if you're down to one Kong.
I don't know if this is true, but it seems to me that Dixie has a larger hitbox.
She has a differently shaped hitbox. Yeah, like it matters in Glimmer's Galleon, which Kong you are at certain point.
Yeah. Now the longest level.
Yep. So are we going to be doing anything wacky here, or just shooting to the top?
I'm just gonna do it, I guess, the intended way.
Okay.
There is a glitch you can do to make the.
There's two glitches you can do actually to speed up this level. One of them is a wrong warp, which saves about 4 minutes, I want to say. And then there's also, I think, a goal summon is the is what people call it, where that saves about 3 minutes. But both of, especially the wrong warp, are are pretty picky as far as and like with the wrong warp, you also risk soft locking the game if you mess it up.
I don't think I've ever seen the wrong warp on this level. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, you basically you create an invisible barrel and then use it in order to mess with the cleaver or cutlass enemy, and then you jump into the Ramby barrel, and then for whatever reason when you come out and then die on the cutlass, it ends the stage. Easy peasy, right?
Oh yeah.
I think that's the most recently discovered wrong warp. I think it's been under 2 years since that was discovered.
So here's where you do the goal summon. The level
That's
could
where
end
you'd
right
basically
there.
you'd need to carry the DK barrel from the start of the stage all the way up to the point she just passed, and then break it against the wall at a very specific point in order to just cause her to go to the top.
Okay, so there is some stuff I can do to speed this up, even though it's an auto-scroller. So I'm gonna get pretty far ahead of the floor just by throwing Dixie and going up. And then I get the parrot and can fly up. And then what I'm gonna do is go into a bonus area and then immediately lose. And when you come out of that, it catches the floor up to where you are. So I don't have to wait for it to go all this way.
Yeah, we saw that a bit in Donkey Kong Country 1, even though Void didn't want to complete any bonus stages. There were a few places where going into them ended up saving time. Yeah, I know this level is very infamous as far as just how glitchy it is, because I've heard there's ways to like delete the save files on your cartridge by.
Oh yeah, I've actually done that before.
Oh, you have? Okay.
I have, yes.
Either pink or purple lemonade. I think I've heard another way to describe graphical glitches you can do to the background.
Oh, whoops. Now we get to hear Diddy saying, "Help me!" And so back when I first started running this game, there weren't really any speedruns of this game. There was one of, is it the Game Boy Advance? Is there a Game Boy Advance version?
Game Boy Color.
Game Boy Color?
Land
Okay,
3,
maybe that's what it was. Game Boy Color. There was a speedrun of that, and I got some ideas from that, but there are a lot of differences. And so I also looked at the TAS. There was a TAS at the time. But mostly the route I just came up with myself, because I guess no one speedran this game at the time.
Yeah, how long have you been speedrunning this game? Since like
Probably about 12 years. 2007 or 2008.
Wow. That's something I always have admiration to, people that can just make a speedrun route for a game out of nothing without having like tutorials and other resources to draw from. Alright, so Clapper's Cavern, another ice-themed stage. This is kind of a return of Clapper seals that freeze the floor that was in a stage that she skipped using a warp zone in World 2. Yeah, pretty basic, mostly horizontal platforming. I think the most interesting part of the stage, I think, is the end, as far as how you work with the invincibility barrel to try to get through as many of the bees and porcupines as you can.
Yeah, and I kind of messed it up.
Yeah, because with just the right route, you can actually make it all the way to the end before losing your invincibility. But a really, really good other way to handle it is just to throw that barrel like she did, because that just kills all the enemies in front of you. All right, so then we have Chain Link Chamber. This is a stage where I think playing it warpless is a lot more difficult than doing the wrong warp. Just because there's just so much climbing, and climbing is I think is very deceptively difficult in this game, because the game likes to eat your jump inputs if you're trying to climb really fast.
So these long vertical sections, it's faster to jump up if you're good at it, but I'm not good at it. So if there's multiple ropes, then I'll jump between them, but if it's just one going up, I have a hard time jumping up it.
Yeah, fortunately the invincibility barrel, about a third of the way through the stage, actually lasts a pretty long time too. You can get
Yeah,
through
it
a lot
does.
of the rooms that way. Nice little shortcut past that one is to roll through the chains instead of actually just climbing down like you're intended to. Alright, and that's Chain Link Chamber. And then we go straight into Toxic Tower, which, depending on what types of strats you use in the snake section, I think can either be one of the hardest stages or one of the easiest.
Yeah, so there's a double jump you can do with the snake, but I am not going to do that.
Yeah, so if you're using a no double jump route, a lot of the routing for this involves kind of like in World 3, making use of the short hops that Ratley does when you move just naturally in order to extend the height of your jumps. Like she did one right there to get up over that bee. Because there's several places where doing that lets you skip having to do a charge jump and save time. All right.
Whenever I'm speedrunning this, I forget that there's actually stuff rising up that you're trying to avoid. Because you never see it.
Yeah, you only really get to see the owie green water, as I like to call it, in the windows. It's one thing I do remember fondly when you used to run this game more often, to the owie bees and the owie green water.
Oh yeah, my kids, they call them the owie bees. My kids are growing up now. I mean, 10 years ago when we did CGDQ, I was pregnant with my second child, and now I have 5 kids.
Alright, so through Toxic Tower, I guess we kind of glossed over that there was also a parrot and a spider section too. The spider section is pretty trivial if you're not going for the bonus stage, though. And for whatever reason, there is no boss in World 6. I don't know if they cut it out because they ran out of time or what the deal was, but the true boss of World 6 is actually moving to World 7, because this is the only part in the run where you have to where the game doesn't automatically push you to the next world because of the cutscene that happens before it. And if you actually re-enter World 6, you have to go to the airport to get out. Alright, so we've got Screech's Sprint, the last the last stage before the final boss. The first half of it just has a lot of tight jumps over brambles and a last bit of climbing too. And the second half is it's a race against an evil version of Squawks called Screech, and she's going to be trying to do what's called the race skip. Hope didn't get it though.
No, I didn't try to do it.
Okay, yeah. If you go over Screech, you actually skip the game freezing to start the race, so that saves a few seconds.
I usually get hurt trying to do it though.
Yeah, because you can hit the brambles pretty easily. Actually, winning the race is pretty easy if you know what you're doing, though.
Oh, that went pretty well.
Yep, very nice. So now we are on to Captain K. Rool. It's the final boss of this run, although the final boss of the game requires doing World 8, which requires getting all of the bonus stages. There's a category called 102% that does all of that, but for this we're just trying to get credits from a fresh file, so the run's going to end after the first fight with K. Rool. So there's 3 different phases to the K. Rool fight, each of which takes 3 hits. We're coming up on the last bit of RNG in this run too, which is which of these cannonballs gets despiked. I like the right one better because it makes the hit easier. A little fun thing I really like about this game too is that the colors of the big controller in the background are different depending on which version of the game it is too, because Essentia is playing on the US Super Nintendo versions. There's a Super Nintendo controller in the background, but if it was the Japanese Super Famicom version, it'd be a Super Famicom controller back there, which has different colors. So once you know what you're doing with the K. Rool fight, the real challenge is just getting the hits as fast as possible. Like a perfect hit, we like to call dustless, because you hit K. Rool's blunderbuss on the first frame that you can, and you don't actually see the dust sucking sprite at all. But going for a couple of the dustless hits in particular is also kind of risky, because then if you do it too early, you just clank off, and you only have a limited amount of time to actually get the hit before you lose the cycle and lose a bunch of time because of having to redo it. And so the third phase, each cycle is based on colored gas, and she wants, even though none of these gases actually cause damage, the blue gas freezes her, the red gas slows her down, and the purple gas reverses her controls. You do not want to get hit, especially by the red or purple gas, because that K. Rool will actually delay for a few seconds before starting to shoot cannonballs. So you want to try to avoid the gas if you can.
There.
I'm assuming it's just the developers did that so you'd actually be able to tell what the gas did to you before you actually have to start dodging cannonballs again. Avoided the purple gas, so we're going to be coming up on time pretty shortly. Time for this run is when she collects the final crumb coin after defeating K. Rool.
Time.
GG.
Oh, what was my time?
57:42.
Okay. Not too bad for having been rusty on this game.
Still a very good run. Certainly faster than, I'm sure, almost anyone currently watching this, the 8,000 people watching this, and any of us could have done.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, was it Mudhole that was a little rough, and then pretty much everything else was pretty smooth for the route you used?
Yeah, I think Mudhole was the worst part. That's okay, it's my least favorite level, so.
Well, thank you to Essentia for the incredible run, and thank you, Puwexil, for your commentary.
Pleasure, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for letting me run this again. It was fun.
Of course. Essentia does have some more runs, don't you? Coming up tomorrow.
Yes, I'm doing the last 2 runs of the marathon. Dr. Mario, followed by Final Fantasy VI.
All right, so be sure to check that out tomorrow. Next up, we have Summoning Assault with Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. So don't go anywhere, friends. We'll be right back. Thank you for watching the Donkey Kong block, and thank you again to our runners.